On a stormy morning, a young black woman from a poor neighborhood was on her way to the most important job interview of her life. But unexpectedly, along the way, she came across an elderly white man whose car had broken down. Even though she knew stopping might cost her this precious opportunity, she chose to help him and ultimately missed her interview. What she didn't realize was that the old man was a powerful, mysterious CEO. What happened next would change her life forever. Dawn had barely broken. Above Southbridge, Chicago, the sky was veiled by a thin sheet of gray clouds after last night's steady rain. The streets still lay in half slumber, and the worn street lamps flickered as if desperately trying to hold on to the last faint gleam before sunrise. Rain puddles clung to the cracked sidewalks, catching the weak yellow light. Not far off, a handful of battered cars crept past, their engines humming like the city's perpetual sigh. In a small second, floor apartment of an aging building, Jasmine Reed woke after a nearly sleepless night. The 24-year-old rose gently from her simple bed, its lavender coverlet dulled with wear. She moved slowly to the tiny window, pulled back the curtain, and breathed deeply, attempting to calm the nervous flutter in her chest. Today was the day she had been waiting for. Her chance at the interview of a lifetime with Whitmore and Blake, one of Chicago's most prestigious financial firms downtown. For years, she'd vowed to seize any opportunity to escape her circumstances. She had poured herself into her studies, determined to rise above poverty, and now the moment was at hand. Jasmine stepped in front of the full-length mirror. She saw a young black woman with a gentle expression, smooth, healthy skin, and dark brown eyes brimming with resolve. Her tall, slender frame carried an air of quiet strength. She'd carefully pulled her natural curls into a neat high bun, elegant yet full of life. Her hand brushed over the crisp white blouse and navy women's suit hanging on her rack, the best professional outfit she owned, bought on sale 2 years ago, now ready for this defining day. She offered herself a small, bittersweet smile as she remembered the struggles she'd endured. Growing up in Southbridge, an area marked by poverty, unemployment, and crime, had hardened her resolve. Her mother, Linda Reed, a woman of boundless grit, had raised Jasmine alone, working 2 jobs, waiting tables at a cafe by day and cleaning a hospital by night, to give her daughter an education. Witnessing her mother's sacrifice, Jasmine had always told herself she must excel, not just for herself, but to lift them both out of hardship. In the cramped kitchen, she brewed a quick cup of black coffee and took a few hurried sips to steady her nerves. Her phone buzzed on the table. She picked it up to read a message from her mother. "My dearest daughter, today is your special day. Just be yourself. I know you'll succeed. Love you so much." Jasmine read the words slowly, warmth spreading through her chest. A simple text, yet it carried the full weight of her mother's faith. She tapped back, "Thank you, Mom. I'll give it my all." Her steps grew more confident as she finished getting ready. She looked into the mirror one last time, inhaled deeply, and thought, "Today, I'll prove I deserve this chance." She slung her small leather bag over her shoulder, its contents meticulously organized, her resume, a glowing recommendation from her college professor, and a stack of carefully prepared documents. Her black pumps, scuffed but polished, awaited by the door. When Jasmine stepped out of the apartment, her heart pounded with adrenaline. This wasn't just another interview, it was her one shot to break free from Southbridge's grip and repay her mother for years of sacrifice. Each footstep down the creaky stairs echoed her determination. But as soon as she hit the sidewalk, she noticed the sky had darkened significantly. Thick gray clouds rolled in, ominously echoing last night's forecast of an approaching storm. Jasmine glanced upward, a flicker of concern passing through her. "Don't worry," she murmured to herself. "Just a little rain. Nothing can stop me today." She hurried into the flow of commuters, unaware that this seemingly ordinary morning was the start of a chain of events, full of surprises, tension, and fate that would change her life forever. Jasmine hurried out into the street, the lingering nerves and worry still clinging to her from the moment she'd left her tiny apartment. Her steps joined the tide of early, morning commuters, each footfall weighed down by high hopes tinged with unease. She tried to inhale deeply to steady her mind, but it felt as though everything was conspiring against her from the very start. Only minutes ago, the sky had worn the pale gray of dawn. Now it had darkened with alarming suddenness. Massive black clouds rolled together overhead, forming a heavy, oppressive blanket across the city. Jasmine felt a chill wind whip across her skin, its sharp whistle sounding like a warning in her ear that today would be anything but easy. She shivered, her eyes flicking over the throng of people scrambling to outrun the looming storm. Pulling her collar up against the breeze, she broke into a brisk walk toward the nearest L station. Her heart pounded in her chest, each thump echoing like a drumbeat urging her forward. Once aboard the train, Jasmine claimed a seat by the window and let her gaze drift across the passing cityscape. The familiar clang of the departure bell rang out like a somber soundtrack to her day. Buildings and streetlights blurred past in a hurried montage, but her thoughts stayed fixed on the Whitmore and Blake interview awaiting her. She silently ran through the answers she'd rehearsed all week, reminding herself this was her life, changing moment, that she had to prove her true worth. The more she thought, the heavier the pressure felt, as if her anxieties were tightening around her. Then a sharp voice cut through her reverie. Across the aisle, a middle-aged man in an impeccable black suit, his hair slicked back, was barking into his phone with cold authority. Jasmine studied his sharp features. His eyes narrowed, lips pressed into a thin line of impatience. "Listen, Emily," he snapped, enunciating each word with icy precision. "I told you I won't accept any delays. 2 minutes late is still late, and you know it better than anyone. No more excuses, fix it now." He slammed the phone shut, leaving a tense silence in his wake. His gaze snapped up and landed on Jasmine watching him. A flicker of annoyance crossed his face, as if her mere presence was an intrusion. Jasmine quickly averted her eyes, her heart thudding oddly. "You got a problem?" he demanded, his tone dripping with irritation and condescension. "No, sorry," she stammered, forcing herself to sound calm. "I didn't mean to stare." He let out a derisive snort and turned back to his phone. Jasmine felt a flush of frustration rise but pushed it down. She couldn't afford distractions. The train screeched into the next station. The man stood, straightened his jacket, and stepped off. As he brushed past her, his cold stare locked onto her once more. A silent warning. Jasmine caught sight of a small gold pin on his lapel. A stylized WB. Her pulse skipped. No way, she thought. But she banished the thought immediately. She refused to let trivial fears derail her focus. Outside the window, raindrops began to patter lightly against the glass. Quiet yet foreboding taps hinting at harsher weather to come. Jasmine watched the rivulets snake down the pane, mirroring the knot of anxiety tightening in her chest. She clutched her bag tighter, fingers pressing into the stack of resumes and that precious recommendation letter she'd poured her heart into preparing. She couldn't allow anything to throw her off now. She'd come too far and sacrificed too much to accept failure. She had to succeed. Herself, her mother, and all her mother's sacrifices depended on it. An announcement chimed. The train was arriving at the final stop. Jasmine drew in a steadying breath, pushing every negative thought aside. But just as she rose to disembark, a sudden flash of lightning lit the sky, immediately followed by a deafening crack of thunder that made her heart leap in her throat. When the doors slid open, she stepped onto the platform and was met by a biting gust that drove the rain harder against her face. She lifted her eyes to the darkened sky and silently prayed this wasn't a harbinger of the storms still to come. Yet deep down, she couldn't shake the feeling that the day's unsettled omens were only growing clearer. Jasmine stepped off onto the platform and was instantly met by the bone, chilling blast of wind and rain, a ruthless warning that she'd entered a battle fiercer than anything she'd ever prepared for. The sky was ink, black with streaks of lightning slicing through the darkness, illuminating the familiar cityscape in strange, menacing relief. The downpour began without mercy, as if the entire world had decided to turn against Jasmine on the most important day of her life. Each icy drop fell like a pinprick, seeping through her thin coat and sending shivers through her. She fumbled in her bag for the small umbrella her mother had told her to bring, but just as she popped it open, a sudden gust flipped it inside out, shattering its fragile frame in her hands. Disappointment washed over her, but she couldn't stop now. Her carefully styled hair was quickly soaked, water streaming down her pale cheeks. Jasmine inhaled deeply, then hurried to the curb and waved desperately at a slow, approaching yellow cab. "Taxi!" she shouted into the torrent, her voice barely rising above the roar of rain. The cab pulled over, blinkers flashing. Hope flickered in her chest, until a tall figure lunged from behind, shoved her aside, and slipped inside before she could reach the door. Stunned, Jasmine turned and saw the same cold, disdainful face from the train, the middle-aged man with the gleaming WB pin on his lapel. "I'm sorry, but I'm in a greater hurry," he said icily, showing not a shred of regret. The door slammed shut. The cab's wheels spun, flinging muddy water over her navy coat. Anger and helplessness surged through Jasmine. She stood there, drenched, feeling the bitter injustice of that blatant discrimination more sharply than ever. In that moment, her heart felt heavy, a single tear mixed with the rain as it trailed down her cheek. Then she shook her head fiercely, determined to banish the rising resentment. "No," she told herself, "I won't give up now." She took a steadying breath and, despite the downpour, dashed off down the sidewalk toward downtown, where the Whitmore and Blake building loomed. The streets had become torrents, clogged drains sending water up onto the sidewalks. Traffic was gridlocked, horns blaring in a chaotic symphony. Jasmine weaved between stalled cars. Her little heels slipped on the slick pavement, making each step a struggle. As she sprinted, her foot caught on a hidden pothole under the water. She stumbled, nearly falling, and her phone tumbled from her bag into the filthy water. Panic clutched her as she scooped it up. The screen flickered on and then went black. With her phone ruined, she had no way to call the firm to explain her delay. Jasmine pressed her lips together, rain and tears blending into one bitter stream. But there was no turning back. She had come too far and sacrificed too much to quit now. Every step felt 100 times heavier, each lift of her foot a duel between will and exhaustion. She kept running, her once prized suit now soaked and plastered with mud, her resume and recommendation letters surely ruined. Yet she refused to stop. She had promised her mother and herself that today she would seize this chance to change her life. Nothing could stop her. After pushing through several more blocks, she finally caught sight of the Whitmore and Blake building in the distance, standing proud against the downpour. Her legs burned, her breath came in ragged gasps, her body trembled from the cold, but her spirit remained unbowed. A few passers-by glanced at her with curiosity, surprise, and sometimes pity. But Jasmine had no mind for their stares. Her focus was singular. Reach the firm, no matter how battered she arrived. With every step closer to the building's entrance, she realized this day's true struggle wasn't just about making it to an interview. It was a fight against prejudice, between hope and despair, between inner strength and fate's harshest trials. She vowed she would prevail, no matter the cost. But as she finally stood before the building's doors, utterly spent, Jasmine realized the real challenges were only just beginning. Standing before the doors of Whitmore and Blake, Jasmine panted, her body trembling from cold and exhaustion. Rain still poured down in relentless sheets, each drop piercing her thin coat like a cruel reminder of fate's harshness. She glanced up at the large clock overhead. Only minutes remained until her interview. Summoning every last ounce of strength, she prepared to dash across the crowded street toward the entrance, when something caught her eye and froze her in place. Not far off, at the curb, a sleek black luxury car stood with its hazard lights blinking. Its rear tire was utterly flattened, soaking in the rising floodwaters. An elderly gentleman, lean but impeccably dressed, his silver hair neatly combed, struggled to change the tire. Though his suit was clearly high-end, now it was sodden and streaked with mud. His eyes betrayed exhaustion, worry, and a mounting helplessness as the jack slipped on the slick pavement. Passing pedestrians and drivers paid him no heed. Some even deliberately turned away to avoid getting involved. Jasmine stood, motionless in the downpour, her heart suddenly growing heavy. She stole a glance at Whitmore and Blake's imposing facade, a chance so monumental it could reshape her and her mother's destiny. Yet, when she looked back at the stranded man, her mother's face flashed in her mind. She could almost hear Linda Reed's stern but loving counsel from Jasmine's childhood. "My daughter, never let ambition blind your heart. A truly good person helps others not for gain, but because it's the right thing to do. Kindness will guide you to genuine success." Those words penetrated Jasmine's soul. She clenched her fists, feeling the weight of the choice before her. On her shoulders lay the hopes of her future, and the moral compass her mother had instilled over the years. She could not simply walk on by a fellow human in dire need, especially in such brutal conditions. Jasmine bit her lip, stole one last glance at her watch with a pang of regret, and then turned away from the path to the building. Each step toward the old man felt like a knife twisting in her own ambition, but also a stride closer to the compassion her mother had taught her. In that moment, Jasmine understood she wasn't choosing between success and failure, but between conscience and indifference. "Sir, let me help you," Jasmine called out firmly, her voice clear amid the roar of the storm. Startled, the old man looked up. His deep blue eyes widened in surprise when he saw the soaked, pale young woman standing before him, determination blazing in her gaze. "Young lady, I wouldn't want to trouble you," he replied, his voice unsteady despite his effort to hide his embarrassment and distress. "It's pouring out here. You surely have more important matters to attend." "It's no trouble at all," Jasmine insisted, crouching to examine the flat tire. "I couldn't just walk away knowing you're in need." She set her bag gently aside and set to work, steadying the jack. Her fingers, already numb from cold, trembled as they gripped the icy metal tools, but her eyes showed no hesitation, only fierce resolve to free him from this predicament. The man watched her, his expression softening from astonishment to deep gratitude. Though still wary, he stepped back and entrusted the task to Jasmine. "My name is Jasmine," she said as she removed the lug nuts, striving to ease the tension in the air. "Pleased to meet you, Jasmine," he responded quietly, his voice steadier now. "I'm Richard Whitmore." "Mr. Whitmore, hold on to this umbrella," Jasmine offered with a reassuring smile. "I'll be quick." In that moment, Jasmine realized the opportunity she had long coveted was gone, but so was her doubt. Under the cold rain, she felt an unexpected warmth in her chest, as her mother had promised. When you do what's right, you'll never regret it. Once the new tire was firmly in place, Jasmine stood, her clothes soaked and splattered with mud, yet her eyes shone with pride. She retrieved her bag and nodded respectfully to Mr. Whitmore. "All done, Mr. Whitmore. Please get back in before you catch cold." Richard, his voice trembling with gratitude, said, "Thank you so much, Jasmine. You're a remarkable young woman." Jasmine offered him a gentle smile, hiding the flicker of regret in her heart, and turned to walk away through the still, falling rain. Though the big break she'd prepared for had slipped from her grasp, she knew with all her heart that today she had made the right choice, and that decision would define who she truly was. Just a few steps away from the car Sir Richard Whitmore had just fixed, Jasmine heard an urgent voice call out behind her. "Jasmine, wait a moment." She turned around, surprised to see Mr. Whitmore striding hurriedly toward her, despite the downpour, his silver hair plastered to his forehead. The helplessness she'd first seen in his eyes had vanished, replaced by a look of firm resolve and genuine warmth. "Mr. Whitmore?" Jasmine said, stopping in her tracks. Her eyes widened, lashes heavy with rain. "I can't just let you walk away without properly thanking you," he panted. "I can't believe that in the midst of a storm like this, someone would help me so wholeheartedly." Jasmine shook her head, offering a gentle smile that shone through the rain like a blossoming flower in a storm. "It's nothing, Mr. Whitmore. Anyone would have done the same. I just wanted to make sure you were safe." "But you didn't merely give me cursory help," Mr. Whitmore pressed, admiration clear in his gaze. "I saw how skillfully you changed that tire. Where did you learn to do that so well?" Jasmine's cheeks flushed, but she answered calmly, with humility and honesty in her voice. "I grew up in Southbridge. My mother raised me alone and worked tirelessly, so I started helping out whenever I could. My Uncle Marcus runs a small auto shop on the corner. Ever since high school I've been there, learning to change tires, fix cars, anything that could earn me a little money for school." Mr. Whitmore was silent for a long moment, his face awash with emotion at her sincere words. He pictured a small but strong young woman who had overcome countless challenges to define herself. That image stirred deep gratitude in his heart. "Jasmine, there's something I've been wondering," he said slowly. "You said today was incredibly important to you. I noticed how urgently you acted when you helped me. Where were you rushing off to?" Jasmine's smile faltered, and her eyes grew wistful as she looked toward the distant silhouette of the Whitmore and Blake building looming under the gray sky. "I actually had a job interview today, Mr. Whitmore," she said. "With Whitmore and Blake, the big financial firm downtown. I spent a month preparing for it. It was my chance to change things for my mom and me, but—" her voice trembled as she fought back the lump in her throat. "But now it's too late. I'm sure I've missed it, but I don't regret it. I believe I did the right thing." The rain fell steadily, each drop tapping the pavement like a small drumbeat in the heavy silence between them. Mr. Whitmore looked at Jasmine, feeling a profound respect and gratitude he hadn't experienced in years. "You are indeed a remarkable young woman, Jasmine," he said sincerely, his voice warm and clear above the rain. "I've never met anyone willing to give up so much for a stranger. I'm truly grateful, and I firmly believe that With your heart and kindness, even greater opportunities await you." "Thank you for saying that," Jasmine replied, her eyes sparkling like stars through the storm. "I was just following my mother's advice, to do what's right no matter the cost." Mr. Whitmore studied her thoughtfully, as if weighing something of great importance. Finally, he gently placed a hand on her shoulder and spoke with warmth and sincerity. "I will never forget what you did today, Jasmine. I am certain that your kindness will be rewarded." He then reached into his suit pocket and produced a small business card, presenting it to her with courtesy. "This is my contact information. Should you ever need anything, please don't hesitate to reach out, and I hope you won't refuse me that." Jasmine hesitated briefly, then accepted the card, tucking it safely into her rain-soaked coat pocket. "Thank you, Mr. Whitmore," she said softly. "I will remember your kindness." They stood together for a moment longer, their silence filled with shared understanding and empathy, before Jasmine turned and walked away into the rain, a bittersweet mix of emotions stirring in her heart. Though the big opportunity had slipped from her grasp, she knew she had followed her heart, and sometimes that was the most important choice of all. Mr. Whitmore watched her small, determined figure fade into the downpour, a renewed resolve swelling within him. He would never let this extraordinary young woman lose her chance so easily. As Mr. Richard Whitmore's figure gradually vanished into the misty rain, Jasmine drew in a deep breath, trying to shake off the anxiety flooding her heart. She looked down at her small, waterlogged wristwatch. Its hands had passed her interview time by more than 20 minutes. Though she knew the opportunity was likely gone, she refused to give up. A sliver of hope still glimmered inside her, urging her to quicken her pace toward the proud, towering Whitmore and Blake building. At last, Jasmine reached the firm's marble lobby, panting, rain-soaked hair plastered to her pale cheeks. Her footsteps slowed as she stepped onto the polished floor, droplets from her drenched clothes splashing into small puddles that reflected the cold light of the crystal chandelier overhead. Inside, the atmosphere was the very opposite of the storm outside, hushed, serene, and unforgivingly chilly. She approached the reception desk, where Emily, a young woman with her blonde hair neatly pinned up, wearing a sharp navy uniform, was focused on her computer screen. Jasmine forced a polite smile, knowing her appearance hardly looked professional. "Excuse me," Jasmine said softly but firmly. "My name is Jasmine Reed. I was scheduled for an interview at 9 o'clock this morning. I know I'm a bit late, but I ran into an unexpected problem on the way. Is there any chance I could still meet with the interviewer?" Emily slowly raised her eyes to Jasmine. Her gaze was icy as it swept over Jasmine's dripping hair, soiled coat, and mud-caked heels. The scrutiny in Emily's eyes made Jasmine's chest tighten, but she held her ground, hoping for a shred of empathy. "Ms. Reed," Emily began evenly, her tone completely unbending, "you are 20 minutes late. Per company policy, we do not accommodate candidates who arrive after their scheduled time. I'm sorry, but you cannot be interviewed today." Jasmine bit her lip, her heart stalling for a moment. She drew in a steadying breath and summoned the courage to speak again, her voice trembling but earnest. "I understand I'm late, but I truly had no choice. Something unavoidable happened. I prepared so thoroughly for this interview. Please, could you let the interviewer know my situation? I just need one chance to explain." Emily's expression remained impassive, her cool blue eyes unmoved. "I'm aware of your circumstances," she said, "but there are no exceptions here. I cannot bend the rules for one individual. You need to accept that." Each word from Emily struck Jasmine like a shard of ice, amplifying her sense of bitterness and despair. Jasmine searched Emily's indifferent eyes for understanding, but found only unfeeling resolve. "Please," Jasmine pleaded, voice catching with emotion. "I've given up so much to get here today, I can't just leave now. Please tell them for me, just once." Emily sighed, the first hint of impatience flickering across her face. She leaned forward, placing both hands on the desk as she looked Jasmine in the eye. "Listen, Ms. Reed," she said. "Whitmore and Blake is one of the largest firms in Chicago. Professionalism and punctuality are paramount here. I'm sorry to hear your story, but I am under no obligation to handle your personal issues. Please understand and leave. Thank you." Every syllable from Emily rang with the finality of a verdict, extinguishing the last fragile ember of hope in Jasmine's heart. Her vision darkened, and her shoulders sagged under the weight of disappointment and helplessness. With no other option, Jasmine turned away from the reception desk. Her steps felt as heavy as stones. Each footfall on the cold marble floor felt like a knife twisting in her heart, a reminder of a dream shattered. When the grand doors closed behind her, Jasmine felt as if the world itself had shut her out in the most merciless way. She stood outside the building in the unrelenting rain, tears blending with the downpour as they traced lines down her cheeks. Her mother's words echoed in her mind, not as comfort, but as a dull ache in her chest. "Mom, I'm so sorry," Jasmine whispered, her voice swallowed by the cold rain on the empty street. Slowly, she started to walk away, letting the storm lash at her as if to punish her for the opportunity she had just lost. Passers-by glanced at her briefly, but none could fathom the depth of pain and bitterness she carried at that moment. The small figure of the young woman faded into the rain, carrying with her a broken dream, but still clutching the intact essentials of her dignity and conscience, the only things she could salvage in life's storm. Jasmine's footsteps sounded slow and heavy as she made her way down the worn hallway toward her familiar little apartment. The moment the door closed behind her, the world seemed to fall into silence, save for the steady drip of rainwater from her soaking clothes. Her eyes drifted around the room, taking in corners full of old memories that now felt strangely distant and cold. She entered the small bedroom and sat on the edge of the bed, her gaze fixed blankly on the window. Through the rain, streaked glass, the street lamp's faint glow struggled to penetrate the storm, casting a pale light on the faded wall. Jasmine remained motionless for what felt like an eternity, letting droplets from her hair fall onto the sheets. Beside her, the contents of her bag lay in disarray. Documents and resumes she'd painstakingly prepared over days, now thoroughly drenched, the ink bleeding away like her own hopes. She lifted the stack, attempting to blot it dry, but each wipe only smudged it further. Finally, she gave in, letting the papers lie as mute testimony to her bitter failure. Emily's cold, indifferent face, the receptionist at Whitmore and Blake, flashed through Jasmine's mind. Emily's curt, unfeeling refusal had echoed like a knife in Jasmine's wounded heart. There, in her pristine uniform and rehearsed smile, Emily embodied every prejudice and invisible barrier Jasmine had struggled against her entire life. Now, alone at last, Jasmine allowed herself to be vulnerable. Tears mingled with rain on her cheeks as years of disappointment, powerlessness, and bitterness welled up inside her. She thought of her mother, the strongest, most resilient woman she knew. For years, Linda had worked tirelessly so that Jasmine might have a brighter future. And now, Jasmine had failed, letting slip the most precious opportunity of her life. How could she bear to tell her mother that their dreams had shattered in an instant? Her phone lay silent on the table, its dark screen as indifferent as her fate. Jasmine wanted to call her mother, to hear that warm, comforting voice, but she lacked the courage. She feared her mother's disappointment, dreaded the thought of letting her down, so she remained seated in the darkness of her own despair, letting the pain gnaw at her soul. The long, heavy night passed in restless wakefulness. Jasmine couldn't steal even a minute of sleep. Thoughts and questions tormented her. Had she done the right thing by helping the old man in the storm? If she'd pressed on, if she'd abandoned him, would things be different now? She knew she'd acted according to her conscience, yet her heart felt unbearably heavy. She stared out at the ink, black sky, wishing dawn would come quickly to banish these haunting thoughts. But when morning finally arrived, it brought only exhaustion and emptiness. That morning, Jasmine lay on her bed, eyes puffy from tears and sleeplessness, when her phone finally rang. "Mom calling," the screen read. Her heart leapt. She sat up and took a shaky breath. After a moment's hesitation, she answered. "How's my daughter? How did the interview go? Was it all right?" her mother's warm, gentle voice asked. Jasmine bit her lip, swallowing back her tremor. I'm fine, Mom. I'm just waiting to hear back. Don't worry." Her voice was light, carefully masking the deep sorrow within. But her mother sensed something was wrong. "Are you sure, Jasmine? You don't sound like yourself. Did something happen? Tell me." Jasmine swallowed another wave of tears and forced herself to speak steadily. "It's nothing serious, Mom. I'm just tired. It rained so hard yesterday I got soaked. I'll be okay, really." She ended the call lightly, but her heart grew heavier for hiding the truth. She knew she couldn't keep this failure from her mother forever, but she couldn't bear to hear her disappointment either. She resolved that one day when she was stronger, she would tell her everything, about her loss, about her choice that day, and about the wounds she was still trying to heal. Until that day came, Jasmine knew she'd have to face her own pain alone, heal her scarred heart by herself, and carve a new path for both her and her mother, one worthy of the sacrifices and faith her mother had invested in her all these years. The weak morning sunlight filtered through the threadbare curtains, gently touching Jasmine's tired face. After her brief phone call with her mother, she still sat motionless on the edge of the bed, her eyes unfocused as she watched shifting streaks of light dance across the faded wall. Familiar sounds drifted in from the neighborhood, the honk of car horns, snippets of conversation, and raindrops splattering against the awning, but it all felt distant, as if happening far away. Suddenly, her phone rang again, shattering the silence. Jasmine jolted, her heart pounding as she looked down at the screen. An unfamiliar number flashed. For a moment, she hesitated, then pressed answer. "Hello, Jasmine Reed speaking," she said softly, trying to mask her nervousness. A professional, polite, yet warm female voice came through. "Good morning, Ms. Reed. This is Natalie Quinn, Executive Assistant to Mr. Richard Whitmore of Whitmore and Blake. I hope I'm not disturbing you so early." Jasmine's breath caught. Richard Whitmore's name rang in her head more clearly than ever. Her heart raced, and she forced herself to reply calmly and politely, "No, not at all, but I wasn't expecting this call. How can I help you, Miss Quinn?" Natalie chuckled lightly, her voice both reassuring and professional. "Mr. Whitmore asked me to contact you directly. He would very much like to meet with you today, Jasmine. He mentioned this meeting is important and he hopes you can make time." A surge of disbelief washed over Jasmine. She'd never dared to imagine that the elderly man she'd helped in yesterday's storm was Richard Whitmore, the powerful CEO of the very firm she'd dreamed of working for. Excitement mingled with her nerves, causing her voice to tremble slightly as she answered, "Of course, I'd be delighted. Could you share a few more details, please?" "The meeting is at 2 o'clock this afternoon. in Mr. Whitmore's private office on the top floor of the Whitmore and Blake building," Natalie said succinctly. "He emphasized that this is a special occasion, and he truly looks forward to seeing you." Jasmine drew in a steadying breath as hope surged through her chest. The despair and defeat of yesterday evaporated, replaced by a newfound determination. She practically felt her heart come back to life. "Miss Quinn, I'm so grateful for this call," Jasmine replied sincerely. "I will be there on time." "Wonderful. I'll send you the details by email right away. See you this afternoon, Jasmine," Natalie concluded warmly. After hanging up, Jasmine sat quietly for several minutes, letting the reality of what had just happened sink in. Yesterday's hopelessness was gone, replaced by a fierce resolve. She sprang to her feet, her heart racing with fresh energy. She set about readying her best outfit, the white blouse and navy suit she'd nearly ruined in the storm. With meticulous care, she laundered and pressed them until they looked immaculate again. She brushed and styled her hair, promising herself that this time nothing would stand in her way. As she prepared, her eyes fell on her still damp resume lying on the desk. The crinkled pages looked like old wounds, but she refused to let them dishearten her. Jasmine booted up her laptop and printed a fresh, pristine set of application materials. Clean, crisp, and perfect. She inhaled deeply, stepping in front of the mirror for one final check. The clear determination in her gaze had returned, shining brightly. She knew this was a chance she couldn't afford to lose again. Time passed, and finally Jasmine emerged from her small apartment. The disappointment and hurt of yesterday had vanished from her face, replaced by confidence, resolve, and a fierce glimmer of hope. She stepped into the midday sunshine, letting its warmth banish all remnants of yesterday's gloom. Standing before the Whitmore and Blake building for the second time, Jasmine drew in a deep breath, silently vowing that today would be different. She wasn't there to beg for a chance. She was there to claim the opportunity her own kindness had earned. The grand doors opened, and Jasmine walked in, believing that life rewards those who remain persistent, courageous, and true to their conscience. And this time, she knew, no matter what came next, she would never give up. Jasmine's footsteps halted in front of the grand doors of the Whitmore and Blake building, her newfound confidence and faith in herself a stark contrast to yesterday's deep disappointment. This time, she drew in a steadying breath, straightened her outfit one last time, then boldly pushed the door open. A rush of cool air from the central air system welcomed her, lending the moment a refined, almost ceremonial atmosphere. Immediately, she sensed the eyes upon her, not the cold, scrutinizing stares of her previous visit, but polite, respectful glances of genuine courtesy. Emily, the receptionist whose demeanor had been icy yesterday, rose promptly from her desk with an unexpectedly warm smile. "Welcome back, Miss Reed," Emily said in a gentle, gracious tone. "Mr. Whitmore has been expecting you. I'll escort you up to see him right away." Jasmine blinked in pleasant surprise at Emily's transformation. Clearly, something had changed overnight. She offered a polite nod and returned a soft smile. "Thank you so much." Emily handed her a special access card, the Whitmore and Blake logo embossed above the bold number 82. Feeling the card's weight in her hand, Jasmine sensed the gravity of the opportunity before her. She followed Emily to the executive elevator bank, a place she'd never imagined stepping foot into. The gleaming doors closed, and the elevator carried her smoothly up to the 82nd floor, the building's pinnacle. Jasmine glimpsed her reflection in the polished interior. Her expression had shifted. Her eyes now radiated strength and resolve. She understood that this return wasn't just about her appearance. It was a powerful affirmation of her inner worth. When the doors opened, she was greeted by an opulent, elegant corridor lined with exquisite artwork and abstract paintings in warm tones, softly lit to highlight every detail. This was a world she'd only dreamed of, luxurious yet tasteful, demanding a graceful composure. "Miss Reed," a polite voice called from behind. She turned to see Natalie Quinn, the woman who had called her this morning. "Good afternoon, Miss Quinn," Jasmine replied with a respectful smile. Natalie stepped forward and offered her hand. "It's a pleasure to finally meet you in person, Jasmine. Mr. Whitmore has spoken very highly of you. He's waiting for you in his private office." Natalie's tone was warm, yet impeccably professional, as she guided Jasmine down the marble hallway. Each footstep echoed softly as they approached the imposing office doors. Jasmine's heart pounded in her chest. "Please, come in," Natalie said with an encouraging nod. "Mr. Whitmore is eager to see you." Jasmine entered the spacious office, where every detail spoke of power and sophistication, tempered by classic elegance. Sunlight streamed through large windows, illuminating the polished ebony desk, its surface neatly arranged with stacks of documents. At the far end of the room stood Richard Whitmore, no longer the frail figure she'd helped in the storm, but upright, composed, and dignified. As she stepped forward, he turned, and his stern visage softened into a warm, welcoming smile. "Jasmine, you've arrived at last," he said, his voice rich and sincere. "I've been looking forward to our meeting." Jasmine returned his smile, moving forward with steady composure despite his commanding presence. "I'm honored to see you again, Mr. Whitmore. I never imagined that the man I helped the other day was you." Mr. Whitmore chuckled, his deep eyes thoughtful as they studied her. "I, too, was surprised to learn that the young woman who came to my aid in my moment of need was someone my own company's rules almost drove away. Your kindness that day truly gave me much to reconsider." Jasmine blinked, taken aback by his words. She realized this meeting was more than just a formality. It was a rare chance to demonstrate not only her professional competence but the integrity and genuine compassion she had shown. In that moment, Jasmine understood that her return, stronger and more determined, was not merely a change of appearance, but a powerful confirmation of the value within her, a value no barrier or doubt could ever deny again. Jasmine stood motionless for a long moment, her eyes fixed on the man before her, so solemn and commanding, entirely unlike the frail, helpless figure she'd helped in yesterday's downpour. In that instant, her heart skipped a beat when she realized that the stranger she'd aided, whom she'd assumed to be just an elderly man with car trouble, was in fact Richard Whitmore, the powerful CEO of Whitmore and Blake. You're," Jasmine stammered, her voice trembling with disbelief. Richard stepped forward, his gaze gentler than ever, a warm, sincere smile lighting his face. "Yes, Jasmine, I am the old man whose tire you changed for me in that storm. I'm delighted that we finally met again, and under much better circumstances." He extended his hand toward Jasmine with respectful courtesy. After a brief hesitation, she clasped his hand firmly. That earnest handshake instantly dissolved the last of her lingering nerves. "I still can't believe it," Jasmine said softly, her eyes reflecting deep emotion. "I never imagined the man I helped would turn out to be the CEO of Whitmore and Blake. It's such an incredible coincidence." Richard smiled gently, keeping his hand warmly on top of hers. "Life has a way of surprising us, doesn't it, Jasmine? That day, I was truly desperate, not just because of the flat tire, but because I felt as if people had grown too indifferent to one another. Yet you appeared and proved that kindness still exists, even in the harshest conditions." He paused, looking out the office window for a moment before turning back to her, his eyes filled with genuine gratitude. You taught me an invaluable lesson about compassion and responsibility. You could have walked on and continued to chase your own ambitions, but you chose to do the right thing, knowing full well it might cost you a precious opportunity. I am profoundly grateful to you, Jasmine. Jasmine listened, her heart pounding, emotion surging in her chest. For the first time, she felt her kindness truly appreciated and valued. Mr. Whitmore, she replied, her voice still trembling but resolute, I only did what my mother taught me as a child, never to abandon someone in need. I never expected such a small act would leave such a strong impression on you. Richard nodded, emotion shining in his eyes. His voice grew rich and earnest. That small act spoke volumes about who you are, Jasmine. I have spent my life building this company, witnessing countless people driven by ambition and skill, but very few who possess the rare qualities you've shown. You reminded me that a person's true worth isn't measured only by expertise or credentials, but by how they treat others. He paused again, his expression serious, as though conveying something of profound importance. That is precisely why I invited you here today. This meeting isn't simply to offer thanks. It's to give you an opportunity deserving of the kindness you showed. Jasmine looked at him in stunned disbelief, her heart nearly bursting with emotion. She could hardly believe her ears, yet the sincerity in his steady gaze left no doubt he meant every word. I'm at a loss for words, Mr. Whitmore, she whispered, her voice choked with feeling. I never imagined my small kindness could lead to such a tremendous opportunity. Richard smiled warmly and gently patted her shoulder in encouragement. You deserve this more than anyone. I believe the compassion, integrity, and sense of responsibility you've shown are exactly what our firm needs. Whitmore & Blake seeks not only excellence in skill, but also character. People who think of others before themselves. Jasmine fell silent, fighting back tears of joy. Finally, she lifted her head and met his sincere gaze, her voice ringing out stronger and clearer than ever. Thank you so much for this opportunity, Mr. Whitmore. I promise you won't regret it. Richard laughed with delight, his eyes shining with trust. I wholeheartedly believe in you, Jasmine. Remember, our encounter that day was no mere coincidence. It was destiny, guided by your kindness and sincerity. In that moment, Jasmine knew she had crossed a threshold of fate, where her compassion had become the key to a brighter future than she had ever imagined. The office fell into a deep, reverent quiet for a long moment, only the soft daylight filtering through the large window and the steady tick of the clock on the wall marked time, underscoring the importance of the moment. Jasmine stood, eyes fixed on Richard Whitmore, the powerful emotions from their conversation still etched on her face. Richard drew in a slow, deep breath and looked out the window, as though gazing back on a distant memory. In his eyes, Jasmine saw a profound nostalgia emerge. He spoke slowly, his voice warm and laden with feeling. Jasmine, you know, many years ago I stood in a position much like yours, full of dreams and ambition, yet facing far too many doubts and prejudices from those around me. He paused, gently adjusting his tie, as if hiding a rare flicker of unease in a man so typically composed and commanding. At that time, I was just a young man with nothing but a heart overflowing with hope. I was turned away by countless prestigious firms simply because I came from humble beginnings and lacked a flashy resume. There were days I couldn't even afford a proper meal, yet I clung fiercely to my dream. Jasmine listened, sensing the sincerity and emotion in his words. The image of a young Richard Whitmore, full of promise but battered by life's harshness, came vividly to her mind, filling her with a deep empathy. "But then," Richard continued, his eyes lighting up at the memory, "I met an older gentleman named William Edwards, the owner of the small shop where I worked part-time. I remember that day so clearly. I stood before him, awkwardly sharing my grand ideas with no credentials to back them up. But Mr. Edwards didn't laugh or doubt me. Instead, he looked me in the eye and said something I've never forgotten. He lowered his voice almost to a whisper, letting the words resonate in the hushed room. 'Richard, I believe in you, not because of your resume or polished words, but because I see honesty, determination, and kindness in your eyes. Never lose those qualities.' Jasmine's eyes widened as she absorbed every word. Here was a powerful man recounting a small yet pivotal moment in his life, and she felt honored to hear it. 'Jasmine,' Richard said gently, turning back to her with understanding and compassion in his gaze. 'Those words from Mr. Edwards guided every decision I made afterward. I learned that a person's true value isn't found in degrees or bank accounts, but in how they treat others. And yesterday, when you chose to stop and help me in that pouring rain, I saw the same qualities in you that once drove me forward.' He rose and took Jasmine's shoulder in a comforting, almost fatherly gesture. 'You didn't just change a tire for me, Jasmine. You reminded me why I started on this path, to create opportunities for those most deserving, for people who lead with genuine kindness.' His voice grew warm and resonant. 'I chose you not for your academic achievements or a flawless resume, but for the rare moral character you displayed. In a moment when you could have pursued your own ambitions, you chose to help a stranger, even knowing it might cost you dearly. That is precisely the quality I seek at Whitmore and Blake.' Tears of gratitude welled in Jasmine's eyes as her heart swelled at his heartfelt words. She had never imagined that a simple act of kindness could carry such significance. 'Mr. Whitmore,' she whispered, voice trembling, 'I'm so deeply moved. I never imagined my small act could open such an incredible opportunity.' Richard smiled warmly, pride shining in his eyes. 'You deserve this, Jasmine. I believe it is your compassion and authenticity that will carry you to where you belong. You haven't merely received this chance. You've earned it through your own remarkable character.' In that moment, Jasmine understood that all her past struggles and failures were but trials that revealed the true power of kindness and sincerity. Standing before Richard Whitmore today, she knew her life had changed forever, and that it was her own goodness that had forged this beautiful destiny. The moment Richard's sincere words fell silent, the room returned to stillness. Jasmine stood motionless, her heart pounding as though it had just experienced a seismic shift. She struggled to steady herself. Her eyes shone with emotion, each of his words treasured like precious gems in her heart. Richard quietly turned back to his desk, sat down, and studied Jasmine with a gaze that was both serious and affectionate. He interlaced his fingers and leaned comfortably into his chair, his voice taking on a measured, authoritative tone. 'Jasmine, when I invited you here today, it wasn't only to thank you for your kindness, but also to extend to you something of great importance.' Jasmine felt her pulse quicken. She drew in a steadying breath and met his eyes with respectful attentiveness. Richard continued, his voice warm and compelling. 'You originally applied to Whitmore and Blake for an analyst position, a vital role, yet still quite standard. But after seeing how you handled yourself, I believe you're capable of much more. You deserve a far greater opportunity, one that will not only test your skills, but also allow you to realize your full potential.' He paused to gauge her reaction before pressing on. "I want you to become my special assistant, working directly under me. This is not an easy role, Jasmine. It will demand far more hard work and significantly greater pressure than a typical position. But in return, it will open doors for you, experience that others spend years striving to obtain." Richard's proposal reverberated through the grand office, leaving Jasmine stunned. The idea of serving as Richard Whitmore's special assistant, a role she had never dared to imagine, felt almost beyond comprehension. "Mr. Whitmore," Jasmine stammered, her voice trembling with awe and disbelief, I really don't know what to say." Richard offered a reassuring smile, his eyes glowing with confidence. "I understand this must be a tremendous surprise, Jasmine, but I did not make this offer out of pity. I truly see exceptional qualities in you, qualities I seldom encounter, even among the hundreds who have worked here. You have integrity, genuine kindness, and steadfast resolve in challenging moments. Those are precisely the traits I need at my side." Jasmine drew in a deep breath, striving to absorb his powerful assurance. Yet, deep down, she wondered if she was truly up to the task. Sensing her doubt, Richard leaned forward, his tone gentle and encouraging. "Jasmine, when I was young, I too faced an opportunity that terrified me. I feared I wasn't good enough, that I lacked the skill. But Mr. Edwards, my mentor, once told me something you should hear as well. Richard, the greatest opportunities in life are not those you feel ready for, but those that force you to become ready." His words hung clearly in the silence of the room, filling Jasmine with newfound strength. She looked into Richard's eyes and felt the sincerity and absolute faith he placed in her. "I don't know if I'm worthy of such trust," she admitted, her voice humble yet resolute. "But I promise I will do everything I can not to disappoint you." Richard nodded, his expression filled with confidence. "I have no doubt you will, Jasmine. Remember, this opportunity comes to you not by chance, but because of your exceptional character. I believe you will rise to every challenge and grow far beyond the role you once dreamed of." Jasmine fell silent, each of his words fueling an invisible reservoir of courage within her. She recognized this as a once-in-a-lifetime chance, one she could never afford to let slip away. "Thank you again, Mr. Whitmore," Jasmine said earnestly, her voice clear and determined. "I accept your offer. I will dedicate myself fully to deserve this extraordinary opportunity." Richard smiled warmly, stood, and placed a trusting hand on her shoulder. "Welcome to Whitmore and Blake, Jasmine. I am truly delighted to have you join me on the journey ahead." In that moment, Jasmine felt the unmistakable turning of her life's page, where kindness, sincerity, and courage would define her future. This incredible opportunity was not merely a career milestone, but a profound affirmation of the values she had always held dear. The warmth of Mr. Whitmore's hand still lingered on Jasmine's shoulder as she left the CEO's office. Each step she took down the gleaming corridors of Whitmore and Blake felt infused with new strength, stronger and more certain than ever before. She knew, from this moment on, her life had turned to a wholly new chapter, one of faith, hope, and opportunity. When her feet touched the sidewalk outside, the gentle golden glow of sunset bathed all of Chicago in breathtaking beauty. Under the late daylight, everything seemed more vivid and alive. The city's clamor, the faces passing by, strangely friendly and inviting. Jasmine drew in a deep breath, her heart overflowing with joy and profound gratitude. On the train ride home to Southbridge, she glanced at her fellow passengers. tired faces worn by a long day's work, and remembered how, just yesterday, she'd sat in the very same seat weighed down by disappointment and bitterness. But today, everything was completely different. The small acts of kindness she had chosen to perform, though seemingly insignificant, had carried her to a future she had never dared to imagine. As soon as she stepped through the door of her familiar little apartment, Jasmine called her mother. On the first ring, her mother's warm, familiar voice came over the line. "Jasmine, my dear, how was your day?" Jasmine steadied her voice, though joy broke through every word. "Mom, I have the most wonderful news to tell you." Her voice trembled with emotion, yet rang with pride and happiness. "Mom, remember the elderly man I helped the other day? You'll never believe this. He was Richard Whitmore, the CEO of Whitmore and Blake. He's offered me a job as his special assistant working directly under him." There was a stunned silence on the other end of the line before Mrs. Reed's voice caught with pride and emotion. "Oh, Jasmine, I don't even know what to say. You know I've always believed in you. Not only because you're smart and hardworking, but because you always do what's right and maintain the kind heart I taught you to have." Her mother's loving, proud words brought Jasmine to tears of happiness. Amid those tears, she felt more grateful than ever, not because she had met Mr. Whitmore, but because her mother had raised her to be kind and sincere. "Mom," Jasmine choked back tears, "I promise I'll do my very best at this job and make you proud. Everything I am, I owe to what you taught me when I was little. Thank you so much." "You've always made me proud, Jasmine," her mother replied, voice thick with emotion. "Not just because of your success, but because you kept your integrity and kindness even in the hardest times. That is a mother's greatest joy." Their conversation ended with tears and joyful laughter. Jasmine then looked around her modest apartment, the place that had witnessed her struggles and dreams. Now, it seemed more beautiful than ever, because she knew her future was no longer a distant dream, but a reality she'd bravely created through her own kindness and integrity. Gazing at the small framed photo of her and her mother on the wall, Jasmine smiled softly, realizing that her new journey was not just for herself, but also a testament to the lasting power of sincere kindness. It never truly disappears, even when obscured by life's prejudices or trials. That quiet evening, Jasmine opened her little journal and wrote words that captured the deepest lesson she had just learned from life itself. True kindness and the courage to do what's right will always be rewarded, even when no one is watching. When you choose to live with integrity, you not only create opportunities for yourself, but also inspire others to believe in the power of goodness. She closed the journal, her heart brimming with hope and determination for the road ahead. She understood there would still be challenges to face, but now she felt neither fear nor doubt. Jasmine had learned the greatest lesson of all, that genuine kindness and moral character are the most precious tools anyone can carry through life. And in that moment, Jasmine knew her bright future lay before her, one built on countless small acts of kindness, on courage and perseverance through every challenge, leading her to authentic success. A future she and her mother had always dreamed of was finally beginning. Thank you for following Jasmine on this moving and meaningful journey. Her story reaffirms that sincere kindness, compassion, and the bravery to do what's right will always be honored, even when unseen. What about you? Have you ever faced a choice between personal ambition and genuine kindness? Share your experiences and thoughts in the comments below. If this story inspired you, please like, share, and subscribe so you can join us for more heartfelt stories to come. Goodbye for now, and see you again soon.